Think of it as a graduation, Frank. You've built something wonderful here, and now the algorithm gets to carry the torch. Marcus Whitfield said it while sliding a wicker basket across the polished conference table. Blueberry muffins, wrapped in cellophane. A little gold ribbon on top like it was somebody's birthday. My name is Frank Delaney. I'm 58 years old. I've been the regional logistics director for Brightway Retail for 26 years, and I was about to find out that a quarter-century of my life was worth roughly the price of a bakery order from the caterer downstairs. We were in the executive suite on the 14th floor of the Brightway Corporate Tower in Cincinnati. Big glass windows overlooking the river. Long walnut table that could seat 20. Coffee that actually smelled like coffee. This wasn't the usual conference room where they fired the warehouse guys. This was the room where they wanted you to feel important right before they hollowed you out. Marcus Whitfield sat across from me in a charcoal suit that cost more than my first car. 34 years old, cropped beard, expensive watch that he glanced at every 4 minutes like the meeting was cutting into something more urgent. He was the Chief Transformation Officer. That was his actual title. Chief Transformation Officer. A title that didn't exist 18 months ago at a company that had been running just fine for 63 years. Next to him was Priya Chen, the consultant from Halbert Advisory. Black blazer, silver laptop open in front of her, and the kind of clipped professional smile that never quite reaches the eyes. Halbert had been embedded in Brightway for the last 9 months. Every time they showed up, someone with gray hair disappeared from the building. Frank, I want to be transparent with you, Marcus said. The board has approved our transition to the OptiRoute platform. It's AI scheduling, machine learning-driven dynamic load balancing across all 212 stores. Priya's team has run the projections. Priya turned the laptop toward me. A slide, of course. Everything was a slide with these people. Big blue arrow going up, small red arrow going down. Cost savings labeled in bold. Legacy inefficiencies highlighted in yellow. That was me, legacy inefficiency. The system can do what your team does in about a fifth of the time, Priya said. And it doesn't take vacations. I looked at her. It also doesn't take phone calls at 2 in the morning when a driver's stranded outside Little Rock, but I guess we'll see how that plays out. Marcus laughed like I'd told a mildly amusing joke at a dinner party. Well, that's exactly the kind of institutional wisdom we want to capture, Frank, which is why we'd love you to spend the next 30 days doing knowledge transfer with the OptiRoute integration team. 30 days. Knowledge transfer. Translation. Spend the next month training the machine that's replacing you and then get walked to the elevator. Priya slid a folder across the table. My separation package. I opened it. 26 weeks of severance. A signed non-disclosure. A non-disparagement clause with teeth, a one-page letter from HR thanking me for my service, and attached to the folder with a paperclip, a receipt for the muffin basket. The receipt said $47.83. I stared at that number for a long moment. 26 years, 7 regional expansions, 4 hurricane recoveries, and 1 Christmas Eve when I personally drove a semi from Nashville to Atlanta, because our contracted driver quit at midnight, and somebody in accounting had attached the muffin basket receipt to my exit paperwork by mistake. $47.83. That's what my transition apparently cost the company, not counting me. I set the folder down and looked at Marcus. Can I say something, or is that also a legacy inefficiency? He smiled. Frank, this is your moment, please. I've got one question, I said. Just one. Has the OptiRoute system been tested against a real Brightway peak season yet? Marcus glanced at Priya. Priya glanced at her laptop. That little pause told me everything I needed to know. The system has been validated against 3 years of historical data, Priya said carefully. The predictive accuracy is above 94% under simulated stress conditions. Simulated, I repeated. So no then, Marcus jumped in. Frank, respectfully, we're not here to relitigate the technology. That decision has been made at the board level. Deloitte signed off. McKinsey signed off. We're moving forward. Deloitte and McKinsey have never unloaded a truck in Chattanooga at 4 in the morning, I said. But sure, they signed off. Priya closed her laptop with a soft click. That click was the sound of a conversation ending. I recognized it because I'd heard it in 100 meetings over the years, just never aimed at me. "There's one more piece we'd like to discuss," Marcus said, sliding another document across. "A consulting agreement. We'd like to retain you as an on-call advisor for the first 90 days post-transition. Standard rate, $85 an hour, capped at 10 hours a month." I looked at the number. $85 an hour, 10 hours a month. That was $850. I did the math in my head. Priya's day rate at Halberd was probably around $4,000. Marcus's total compensation package was rumored to be north of $600,000 a year. And they wanted to put my institutional knowledge on retainer for the price of a used dishwasher. "Let me make sure I understand," I said. "You want me to spend 30 days training the algorithm that replaces me. Then you want me available for another 90 days at a rate that would be insulting if I was a college intern. Is that the offer?" Marcus nodded slowly, like he was explaining something delicate. "Frank, we're being generous here. Legally, we don't owe you anything beyond the severance. This is a gesture, and frankly, a lot of your peers would jump at the chance to stay connected to the mission." The mission. There it was. The mission. I thought about Roland Meeks, my counterpart in the Western region. Roland had gotten his muffin basket back in March. Roland now sold real estate in Prescott, Arizona. I thought about Denise Aguirre in Product Ops, who'd been walked out in June with a similar package and a similar smile. Denise was now driving Uber part-time while she figured out her next move. That was the mission, apparently. Making sure the people who built the company had just enough runway to disappear quietly. I closed the folder. I closed it slowly, deliberately, and I set it back on the table between us. "Marcus, can I tell you something you're not going to want to hear?" He leaned back. "Please. The system Priya just showed you. It doesn't know that Dock 4 at the Memphis distribution center floods every time we get more than an inch of rain, so we have to reroute inbound freight to Dock 2 anytime the forecast turns. It doesn't know that Rita Alvarez, our night shift lead in Louisville, is the only person on the entire southeastern seaboard who can talk down our biggest independent trucking contractor when he threatens to walk. It doesn't know that half our regional carriers only answer their cell phones between 6 and 8 in the morning because they're sleeping off the night run." Priya was typing something. Notes, probably, legacy inefficiencies. "And there's about 400 more things like that," I continued. 26 years worth, all in my head. None of it in any system, any spreadsheet, any handoff document, because nobody ever asked me to write it down. "You just assumed I'd always be here to answer the phone." Marcus's smile had gone tight around the edges. "Which is exactly what the 30-day knowledge transfer is for," I laughed. Genuinely. First real laugh I'd had all morning. "Marcus," I said, "you cannot download 26 years of relationships into a Confluence page in 30 days. That's not how this works. That's never how this worked." Priya looked up from her laptop. "Frank, with respect, that's exactly the kind of mystification that keeps organizations dependent on individuals rather than systems. Every process can be documented. Every relationship can be transitioned. That's what change management is." "Change management," I repeated. "Have you ever met Rita Alvarez?" Priya blinked. "I've reviewed her personnel file." "That's not the same thing. Rita's husband died 3 years ago. Congestive heart failure. She took 2 weeks off and came back because she said the warehouse was the only place where things still made sense. I know that because I flew to Louisville for the funeral. I stood in the receiving line. Her son, Miguel, is at Purdue now studying industrial engineering because I wrote him a recommendation letter. Rita picks up her phone when I call at 3 a.m. because she trusts me. She's not going to pick up the phone when an algorithm calls her at 3 a.m., and she's not going to pick up when whatever 26-year-old associate you assign to her territory calls either. That's not in her personnel file." The room had gone quiet. Priya's fingers hovered over her keyboard but weren't typing anymore. Marcus cleared his throat. "Frank, look, I hear you. I do. But the numbers are the numbers. OptiRoute reduces our scheduling overhead by 62%. Our carrier costs dropped by 18% under the new dynamic bidding model. We're looking at $9 million in annual savings minimum. The board doesn't care about anecdotes. They care about EBITDA. $9 million in savings, I said. That's a nice slide. Can I ask what your model assumed for peak season disruption events? Priya answered before Marcus could. We modeled a 15% buffer for anomalous events based on the last 4 years of operational data. 15%, I said. And what happens when we get a 25% disruption? Which we did in 2019 when the polar vortex hit, and in 2021 when the Colonial Pipeline situation cascaded into our fuel contracts, and in 2023 when 3 of our largest carriers all had labor actions in the same quarter. Priya's expression was neutral, professional, and slightly annoyed. The system will adapt. That's the entire premise of machine learning. The system will do what the last 4 years of data trained it to do, I said. And the last 4 years of data were smooth years. You're setting yourself up to get hit hard the first time reality doesn't match the training set. But that's not my problem anymore, is it? Marcus tapped the table with his index finger. 3 times. It was the tapping of a man who had run out of patience but couldn't afford to show it in front of the consultant. Frank, I want to be direct with you. Are you signing the package or not? I looked down at the folder. 26 weeks of severance. 6 months of pay to pretend I hadn't spent 26 years building the thing they were now dismantling on a slide deck. I picked up the pen. Nice pen. Cross-century. Probably cost $40 retail. I could feel Marcus relax a little as I uncapped it. Then I set the pen back down. I'm going to take the severance, I said. I'm not signing the consulting agreement. Marcus tilted his head. Frank, that's leaving money on the table. $850 a month isn't money, Marcus, it's a leash. And I've been on your leash for 26 years. I'm done. Priya's laptop was open again. She was typing something quickly, probably a note to her team lead. Frank Delaney declining consulting retention. Recommend accelerated transition timeline. Elevated risk of knowledge gap. Elevated risk of knowledge gap if she only knew. When do you need me out of the building? I asked. Marcus checked his watch again. We were hoping you'd stay for the 30-day transition period, but given that you're declining the consulting agreement, we can accelerate. Say end of week. End of day works better, I said. Marcus and Priya exchanged a look. That particular look, the one where 2 people who have been rehearsing a meeting realize the meeting has left the script and gone somewhere they didn't prepare for. Frank, that's not really how this process works, Marcus said. It's exactly how this process works, I said. You have my resignation effective immediately. The severance is in the agreement unchanged. I'll leave the muffins. I stood up. My knees popped. They always do now. 58 years of a body that spent a lot of its early career on warehouse floors before it got a desk. Frank, wait. Marcus stood up too. Let's at least talk about a proper handoff. There are ongoing operational concerns, active vendor contracts, the Q4 peak season prep. You can't just walk out. I looked at him. Really looked at him. 34 years old, MBA from Wharton, 3 years of consulting at Bain before he came in-house, 18 months at Brightway. A man who had never negotiated a carrier contract, never approved an emergency reroute, never called a driver's wife to tell her that her husband had jackknifed his rig outside Knoxville but that everyone was okay. A man who was now telling me I couldn't just walk out. Marcus, I said, you said it yourself. Legally, you don't owe me anything beyond the severance. Well, legally, I don't owe you anything beyond the severance either. I'm not under a non-compete for the transition period. I checked. My contract only kicks in the non-compete after I sign the exit paperwork, which I haven't. So as of right now, I'm just an employee giving verbal notice, and I'm done. Priya finally spoke. Her voice was very even. Frank, if you leave without completing knowledge transfer, we may need to revisit the severance terms. The agreement stipulates cooperation with transition. I laughed again. Louder this time. Priya, respectfully, no it doesn't. I read that agreement 3 times last night. My lawyer read it too. There's a request for cooperation phrased as a hope. There's no penalty clause tied to transition milestones. If you claw back the severance because I left too early, you'll be in court by Monday, and you'll lose because a jury of anybody who's ever worked for a paycheck will not be sympathetic to your position. So let's not do the threat thing." Priya's mouth opened slightly, then closed. She hadn't expected that. Consultants are used to talking to people who don't read the fine print. I've been reading fine print for 26 years. It was practically my hobby. Marcus rubbed his forehead. "Frank, please, let's be reasonable." "I'm being extremely reasonable," I said. "I'm taking what's owed to me, I'm declining what's insulting, and I'm leaving on my own terms. The only thing I'm not doing is pretending to be grateful for a muffin basket." I picked up the signed severance from the folder, left the consulting agreement, left the muffin basket, walked to the door. Then I stopped. "One more thing, Marcus. When OptiRoute goes live on Monday and it does something the training data didn't prepare it for and it starts cascading errors through the routing system, don't call me. I mean that, don't call me. Don't have your assistant call me. Don't have Priya call me. Don't send a company car to my house. Because whatever number the answer is, it's going to be much higher than $85 an hour, and I would rather watch what happens next than help you avoid it." I opened the door. The elevator was 3 doors down. I took my time walking there. The 14th floor was quiet at 10:47 in the morning. Executive assistants at their desks, phones on mute, the low hum of an HVAC system that had probably cost more than my house. I walked past the glass wall of the executive suite where Marcus and Priya were still sitting, presumably trying to figure out what had just happened. The elevator opened. I got in. I pressed the button for the 7th floor. Logistics operations was on 7. Been on 7 since 2004, when they'd moved us up from the basement after the second warehouse expansion. My office was in the far corner. Not a corner office in the executive sense, just a regular office that happened to be in a corner because the floor plan had worked out that way. A window overlooking the loading dock behind the building. A framed photograph of my daughter Hazel at her college graduation. A coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Boss," given to me as a joke by my night shift crew about 8 years ago. I sat down at my desk, booted up the computer, opened my email. Then I did something I'd been thinking about for a long time. I opened a new message. Subject line: "Thank you, recipients. Every single person in my regional operations directory. 238 names. Warehouse leads, dock supervisors, dispatchers, driver liaisons, night shift managers, the guys in the fuel yard, the women in the returns processing center, the maintenance crews who kept the conveyor belts running, the IT contractors who'd helped me duct tape the routing system together for 2 decades. I typed it out slow. No corporate language. No HR-approved farewell template. Friends, as of today, I'm no longer with Brightway Retail. It has been the honor of my working life to serve alongside every one of you. You are the reason 212 stores get restocked every week. You are the reason customers can walk into a store on a Tuesday morning and find toothpaste on the shelf. You did that. Not the executives, not the consultants. You. If you ever need a reference, a phone call, or just someone to complain to about a bad shift, my personal cell is below. I mean that. Frank. I put my personal cell number at the bottom. My personal email. The address of a P.O. box I'd kept for 15 years for exactly this kind of moment. I hit send. Then I stood up, took the photograph of Hazel off the shelf, tucked it under my arm, and walked out of my office. I left the mug. I left the desk lamp. I left the calendar with next quarter's scheduling grid still pinned to the wall. Anyone who wanted them could have them. I took the elevator down to the ground floor. But I didn't leave the building. Instead, I walked out the back, across the small employee parking lot and around to the loading dock. Our loading dock, the corporate one, was small compared to any real distribution center. 2 bays, maybe 3 shipments a day. But there were always guys back there. Delivery drivers, maintenance techs, the 2 Brightway warehouse workers who ran corporate supply. I found Deshaun Beckett on Bay 1, checking in a pallet of office supplies. Deshaun had been at Brightway for 11 years. He'd been on my team back when I was still running the Cincinnati distribution center hands-on. "Frank," he said, surprised, What are you doing back here? You never come down here anymore. I came to say goodbye, Deshan. He stopped what he was doing, set his scanner down, looked at me for a long moment. They finally did it. They finally did it. He nodded slowly. He wasn't surprised. Nobody who worked with their hands at Brightway had been surprised by anything the corporate office did in the last 3 years. I stuck out my hand. He shook it. Then he pulled me into one of those quick, gruff hugs that men who work on loading docks give each other. Where you gonna go, Frank? Deshan asked. Home first. Then I don't know, take a couple weeks, figure it out. You gonna be okay? 26 weeks of severance. My mortgage is almost paid. Hazel's out of college. I'm going to be fine, Deshan, he nodded. Then he pulled out his phone. Give me your personal number again, the one from the email. I gave it to him. He typed it in, saved it, and then hit call. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Now you got mine too, he said. Anything you ever need, Frank, anything. I drove home, took the long way. Through the neighborhoods I'd driven through 1,000 times in the last 26 years. Past the diner where I used to get coffee at 5 a.m. before the early shift meetings. Past the on-ramp where I'd sat in stopped traffic for hours the day of the 2011 chemical plant fire, when we'd had to reroute every truck in a 100-mile radius. Every block had a memory. 26 years is a long time to work at one place. Long enough that the city itself becomes an extension of the job. I got home around 1. My wife Marlene was in the kitchen making a sandwich. She looked up when I walked in. You're early. I got laid off. She stopped, knife hovering over the bread. Today, about 2 hours ago. She set the knife down carefully, wiped her hands on a dish towel, walked over and put her arms around me. Didn't say anything for a while. That's one of the things I love about Marlene. She knows when to talk and when not to. Are you okay? She finally asked. I think so. I'm a little numb, honestly. Did you know it was coming for about 6 months? She pulled back to look at me. 6 months, Frank, you didn't say anything. I didn't want to worry you until it was real. It's real now. She kissed my forehead, then went back to finishing the sandwich. Made a second one for me without asking. That was Marlene. The world could be ending and she'd still make sure you had lunch. We ate at the kitchen table. I told her about the meeting, the muffin basket, Marcus, Priya, the receipt for $47.83. She laughed at that, a real laugh. The kind you laugh when something is so absurd that laughing is the only reasonable response. Frank, that's the most on-brand corporate thing I have ever heard. I know. They attached the muffin receipt to your severance paperwork. I know. Are you going to be angry about this? I thought about it for a long moment. About the 26 years. About Rita Alvarez in Louisville. About the Memphis flood dock. About the 400 other things nobody had ever asked me to write down. About Marcus Whitfield calling it a graduation. About Priya's laptop closing with that soft final click. I don't think I'm angry, I said. I think I'm relieved. Marlene nodded like she'd been waiting to hear that. Good, because you've been carrying that whole company on your back for at least a decade, and I've been watching you get grayer every year doing it. It's about time somebody else gets to worry about their trucks. That night my phone rang for the first time at 6:14 p.m. I was on the back deck with a beer watching the light fade. The caller ID said Rita Alvarez. I answered. Frank, I just got your email. Is this a joke? No, Rita, it's real. They laid you off, restructured, automated, something like that. There was a long pause on the line. Then Rita said something I'll remember for the rest of my life. Frank, Rita said, if they call me from corporate on Monday, I'm not answering. I'm not answering on Tuesday either. And if that new system they built starts sending automated messages to my crew, I'm going to tell my crew to ignore them until I hear directly from you that it's okay. You understand me? Rita, no, don't do that. You'll get in trouble. Frank, they can fire me. I've got 2 years to retirement. My pension's vested. My son's out of college. What are they going to do? Put me on a performance improvement plan? Let them try. Rita, I appreciate that. I really do. But please just do your job. Don't put yourself at risk over me. I'm not doing it for you, Frank. I'm doing it because they replaced the one person at that company who ever answered my phone calls with a piece of software. That's not about you. That's about them. And they're going to learn. She hung up. My phone rang 11 more times that night. Different area codes, different voices, same conversation more or less. Some of the calls were emotional, some were furious. A few were resigned in that quiet way you get when you've watched too many good people get pushed out. I told all of them the same thing. Don't do anything stupid. Don't put your job at risk. Just do your work like you always have. But here's the thing about telling people not to do something when they've already made up their minds. It doesn't actually change what they do. It just gives them cover to say later that Frank told me not to. I slept badly that night. Not because I was upset, because my phone kept buzzing. By morning, I had 47 missed calls and over 100 text messages. Marlene made coffee. She looked at my phone, buzzing on the counter, and shook her head. You built something at that company, Frank. They just don't know it yet. Monday morning came. OptiRoute went live at 6 a.m. Eastern. I know it went live at 6 a.m. Eastern because Deshaun Beckett texted me a screenshot at 6:04. The screenshot was of an internal Brightway announcement. All caps headline. OPTIROUTE transition complete. Legacy SCHDULING system. DCOMMISSIONED. Welcome to the future of BRIGHTWAY logistics. Deshaun's message underneath the screenshot said just 3 words. Here we go. The first 12 hours apparently went fine. I know because my phone stopped ringing for a while. Everyone was at work doing their jobs, watching to see what would happen. The routing assignments came out at 5:30 a.m. as usual. The night shift handoffs happened at 6. The morning dispatches went out at 7. Trucks left docks. Product moved. The wheels of retail commerce continued turning. Around lunchtime, I got a text from Terrence Blackwood, one of my former dispatchers in the Cleveland hub. It said, "System's a little slow, but it's working. Maybe they got this after all." I stared at that text for a while. Then I put my phone face down and went out to the garage to fix a leaky faucet that had been on my list for 6 months. I didn't hear anything for about 18 hours after that. And I thought, honestly, maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe the OptiRoute system was better than I'd given it credit for. Maybe Priya's slide deck had been right, and my 26 years of institutional knowledge really was just legacy inefficiency in a nice cardigan. I was still thinking that when Tuesday morning arrived. Tuesday morning was when it started. The first cascade failure hit the southeast region at 4:47 Eastern. A rainstorm rolled through Memphis. Not a big storm. Just steady rain, about 1.5 inches over 4 hours. The kind of storm that happens 6 or 7 times a year in that part of Tennessee. Dock 4 at the Memphis Distribution Center flooded, exactly like it always did. Here's what would have happened under the old system. At about 3 a.m., when the National Weather Service updated its precipitation forecast for the Memphis metro, my scheduling algorithm would have flagged it. Not because the algorithm was smart. Because I'd programmed a manual override into the system 15 years earlier. Any forecast of over 3/4 of an inch of rain in the Memphis service area triggered an alert to the night shift lead, and the night shift lead knew to reroute inbound freight from Dock 4 to Dock 2 before the water started pooling. It wasn't sophisticated. It was a hack. A 15-year-old hack sitting on top of an aging scheduling system, but it worked. Every time. For 15 years. OptiRoute did not have that hack. OptiRoute had 94% predictive accuracy against 3 years of historical data, and 3 years of historical data did not include a note that said Dock 4 floods in the rain, use Dock 2. Because that note wasn't in any system. It was in my head, and in the head of the Memphis night shift lead, a woman named Yolanda Trask. And Yolanda had gotten my resignation email on Friday afternoon at 4:47 a.m. Tuesday, 3 inbound trucks arrived at Memphis Distribution. OptiRoute had assigned all 3 to Dock 4. 2 of them backed up to the dock. The third was still pulling into the yard. Water was already 6 inches deep at Dock 4 and rising. Yolanda Trask, at that moment, was standing in her kitchen in a suburb of Memphis drinking coffee, watching the rain on her window. She had been called in at 4 a.m. by the OptiRoute automated dispatch system, a call she had not answered. Because Yolanda, like Rita Alvarez, had made a decision over the weekend. She was going to work her scheduled shift, which started at 6 a.m. She was not going to answer any automated calls from a system that had replaced the man who came to her father's funeral in 2019. At 4:52 a.m., the two trucks at Dock 4 discovered their loading equipment was underwater. They radioed the site supervisor. The site supervisor, a young guy named Trey who had been promoted 3 months earlier, checked OptiRoute for a rerouting protocol. OptiRoute did not have one. OptiRoute suggested that the trucks wait until the assigned dock became available. Trey, to his credit, did try to escalate. He called the Regional Operations Command line. That line, as of Monday morning, was routed through OptiRoute's automated triage system. The triage system asked him to categorize his issue. He selected Facility Issue. He was placed in a queue, estimated wait time 43 minutes. Meanwhile, 6 more trucks were arriving at Memphis Distribution, then 12, then 20. By 6 a.m., there were 31 trucks in a yard designed to hold 12. They were blocking each other in. The trucks that had originally arrived couldn't leave because they were still assigned to a dock they couldn't reach. The trucks arriving fresh couldn't be unloaded because there was nowhere to put them. Memphis Distribution served the entire southeast region. Every store from Atlanta to New Orleans got their weekly restock from Memphis. If Memphis didn't push freight out on Tuesday, stores across 7 states would start running out of product by Wednesday afternoon. At 6:03 a.m., Yolanda Trask arrived at Memphis Distribution for her scheduled shift. She walked into a yard that looked like a truck stop parking lot at a music festival. She looked at Trey. Trey looked at her. Trey opened his mouth to speak. Yolanda held up her hand. "I don't work for OptiRoute," Yolanda said. "I work for Brightway, and Brightway laid off the only person who knew how to run this dock in the rain, so I don't know what to tell you, Trey." She turned around and walked to her office to start her shift. Now Yolanda didn't sit in her office and do nothing. She's not that kind of person. She started working the shift she was scheduled to work, which was managing outbound freight from the dry goods section. That was her job title. That was her lane. What she did not do was cross-lane into the inbound receiving crisis unfolding 50 yards away, because inbound receiving was not her official responsibility, and the person who had been quietly asking her to handle it as a favor for the last decade no longer worked at the company. This is what corporate people never understand. Companies don't run on job descriptions. They run on favors. Every distribution center in America runs on somebody like Yolanda Trask covering for somebody like Trey off the books out of loyalty to somebody like me. When you break that chain of loyalty, the favors stop. And when the favors stop, the job descriptions turn out to have holes big enough to drive a truck through. Literally in this case. 31 trucks to be exact. By 8 a.m., Memphis Distribution was completely gridlocked. No inbound freight was being unloaded. No outbound freight could leave because the yard was too jammed for the departing trucks to maneuver. That gridlock cascaded because Memphis was supposed to push out 340 truckloads to regional stores that day. Those 340 truckloads were the Tuesday and Wednesday restocks for the entire Southeast. When they didn't leave, OptiRoute did what it was designed to do. It rerouted. It pulled inventory from other regional distribution centers to cover the gap. Atlanta was told to send trucks to cover Alabama. Charlotte was told to send trucks to cover Georgia. Nashville was told to double up on Tennessee, which meant Atlanta, Charlotte, and Nashville now had their own inventory gaps, which meant OptiRoute rerouted again. Louisville was pulled to cover the gap Nashville had created. Richmond was pulled to cover Charlotte. St. Louis was pulled to cover Atlanta. And Louisville, of course, was Rita Alvarez's territory. Rita, at 9:14 a.m. Tuesday morning, received an OptiRoute automated dispatch order to redirect 32 truckloads of merchandise originally scheduled for Kentucky stores to Nashville instead. Rita looked at the order. She looked at her phone. She thought about her weekend conversation with me. She did not push back on the order. She did not escalate. She did exactly what the automated system told her to do. She had her crew load 32 trucks with Kentucky merchandise and sent them to Nashville. The problem was that OptiRoute had made an error. It had pulled Rita's outbound trucks, not her inventory. which meant Louisville sent 32 full trucks of merchandise that was already assigned to Kentucky stores. Nashville received 32 trucks it had no receiving capacity for and no assignments to redistribute. Kentucky stores received nothing. By 11 a.m. Tuesday, the cascade had spread to 5 regional distribution centers. By 1 p.m., 7. By 4 p.m., all 9 regional distribution centers in the eastern half of the country were in some state of operational chaos. Somewhere on the 14th floor of the Cincinnati corporate tower, Marcus Whitfield was watching a dashboard turn red. I know he was watching a dashboard turn red because Deshaun Beckett had taken a picture of it through the glass wall of the executive suite and texted it to me at 3:47 p.m. The picture showed a big screen mounted on the wall of the executive conference room. A map of the United States, 9 regional hubs marked with dots. All 9 dots were red. Underneath the map, a scrolling ticker showed real-time performance metrics. Store restock completion rate, 34% and falling. Estimated stores impacted, 178 and rising. Current revenue exposure, $4.2 million and climbing. Marcus was standing in front of the screen with his hands on his hips. Priya was on a phone call packing. 2 other executives I didn't recognize were sitting at the table with laptops open, typing furiously. Deshaun's caption on the picture said, "Thought you'd want to see this." I set my phone down. Marlene looked at me from across the kitchen table. "Is it bad?" "It's bad." "How bad?" "They're going to call me before dinner," she smiled. "You want me to make more coffee?" "Yeah, better make a pot." My phone rang at 5:23 p.m. Number I didn't recognize. Cincinnati area code. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again at 5:31. Same number. Voicemail. At 5:47, Marcus Whitfield's cell rang through. I let that one ring too. At 6:02 p.m., Richard Ostrom called. Richard was the CEO. I'd met him twice in 8 years. He'd never called me directly before. I let it ring, not out of spite, out of principle. If he wanted to talk to me now, he could sit with the silence for a while the way I'd sat with the silence of being called a legacy inefficiency for 6 months. Richard left a voicemail. I listened to it that evening after dinner. "Frank, this is Richard Ostrom. I want to speak with you directly. We are in a difficult situation. I understand the circumstances of your departure were not handled well. I would like to make this right. Please call me back at your earliest convenience. My cell is available 24 hours. 24 hours. Same number that had been available for 26 years if he'd ever thought to give it to me." By Wednesday morning, 212 Brightway stores across the Southeast and Midwest had gone dark. Not literally, the lights were still on, but with empty shelves in critical categories. Milk, bread, paper products, pharmacy items, the stuff people actually shop for. Local news stations in 6 states were running stories. Corporate media picked it up by Wednesday afternoon. The stock dropped 9% by close of trading. On Thursday morning at 9:14 a.m., a black Lincoln pulled into my driveway. Richard Ostrom got out. Alone. No consultants. No Marcus. Just Richard in slacks and a rumpled dress shirt looking like he hadn't slept in 48 hours. I met him on the porch, didn't invite him in. "Frank," he said, "I need your help." I looked at him for a long moment, then I said, "Richard, my consulting rate is $450 an hour. Minimum engagement 40 hours paid in advance, wire transfer only, and I don't sign any non-disclosure agreements about the terms of my engagement." He didn't blink. "Done. I'm not coming back as an employee, ever. I'm a contractor. When this crisis is over, I walk away and you don't call me again unless it's at the same rate. Understood?" And Marcus Whitfield gets nowhere near the operations floor while I'm working. I don't want to see him. I don't want to hear from him. If he tries to insert himself, I leave and I keep the retainer. Richard nodded. "He's already on administrative leave, Frank." "Good." I stabilized the system in 9 days. Cost Brightway an estimated $41 million in lost revenue, contractual penalties, and emergency logistics contracts before I was done. My invoice for those 9 days of work came to just over $144,000. That's when the consultant from Halberd in her post-crisis report to the board called me a $140,000 spreadsheet. It was meant as an insult. I framed the phrase and hung it in my home office. 26 weeks of severance, 9 days of consulting, and the last thing Rita Alvarez said to me 6 months later at her retirement party in Louisville when she raised her glass and said, "To Frank Delaney, who taught us that our worth isn't decided by the people who sign our paychecks. It's decided by what happens when we finally stop signing them." That was the graduation Marcus Whitfield had promised me, just not the one he meant.